Cyberpunk 2077 is, without a doubt, one of the biggest hiccups in CD Projekt Red's history. The game promised setting out far more than any game reasonably ever should provide. And oh, how did it fail? But today, Bear News is not here to look at the fact that it failed, nor the reception it received, because things have changed, times have moved on, and quite frankly, I was way too slow to that mark. Instead, we're actually here to talk about the fact that following the autumn sale, reviews for Cyberpunk 2077, at least over on Steam, have massively improved. And considering just how much effort has been put in by CD Projekt Red to improve this game, to patch, to update, to try and, well, for starters, fix the insane amount of bugs, glitches, and missing features, but also to try and bring it into more of a state that it was envisioned when the announcement was first made. And we can see just from the update list over on Steam, just how much effort they've put in trying to fix things up. With a laundry list of improvements, balances, gameplay fixes, adding features for quality of life, as well as essentially an overhaul to many of the behaviors of the AI elements involved. Now, I will state right at the start, this does not excuse the state the game was released in. And that should never be forgotten. Not only in terms of just another account of games being overhyped and falling short, and quite reasonably a lot of people being rather angry about it, but also for the fact that a developer should never release a game until it's actually done. And if you can't provide it, don't promise it. People won't get mad at the fact that a game is released with limited features when they were the features promised to begin with. They only get angry when people bring up that most hated of lines, subversion of expectations. But minor rant aside, as I said, we're not here to look at how the game failed, we are here to look at what it's become. And going through all of the reviews, well, the game has been reviewed 471,027 times over on Steam, and is currently rocking mostly positive, with recent reviews all being very positive. In fact, the ratio now stands at 357,295 positive to 113,732 negative as of the time of recording. The turnaround has been absolutely phenomenal, with many reviews remarking, yes, it's buggy, yes, there are issues still, but the game is good, it's fun, it's now starting to deliver on some of those promises. And I'm really overemphasizing those terms because there is still a lot more to do before the game can be said to be complete. I've got to say, the story of Cyberpunk 2077, game that never was but one day shall be, maybe, wasn't really something I'd followed that heavily up until I saw an article by Player One. And of course, as always, if you want to see this article yourself, please do check in the description. I put a link to all the articles I used down there. I think I forgot to say it last video, so just covering ground 2042. There are loads of links in there, so do make sure to have a look if you're interested. But in this article, they mention how the title has changed for the better. It shows how the title has improved over time, now achieving a mostly positive rating on Steam, something that, honestly, I didn't think would actually come this quick. And very notably, we can see that the game is on sale for 50% off, no doubt having a fairly large part in why people are now willing to give this game a go. But I should note, as it is definitely important, releasing the game onto multiple platforms, particularly in previous gen, a lot of issues with the game were highly dependent on which version you played. The PC release actually had, yes, a lot of issues, but seems to have been received in a slightly better state, which can especially be told by the fact that Sony temporarily had pulled the game from sales, something that was incredibly damaging to the release of 2077 and the legacy of CD Projekt Red. And it has to be noted that coming over to Twitter, we actually have Powell Sasko, one of the game's quest directors, showed off that they were crying at the fact that the game has become a top seller, with over 15,000 very positive reviews in a matter of days, even taking to using some non-classroom approved language to do so. So that's the main news. Cyberpunk 2077 now showing a resurgence, thanks in no small part, no doubt, from that arguably rather generous discount. But what can we learn from this? Well, for starters, the danger of overhype, and it's certainly something I've seen from many other consumers, particularly from people over on Reddit, really promoting the idea that even if a game looks good, let's just leave it at that and not say how amazing things will be, and get a little disappointed when they're first released. but also the need for games to actually be released in a solid state. Sure, the resurgence is great, and it's definitely going to help sales and the legacy of CD Projekt Red, but the fact that it was released so poorly should not and will never be forgotten, especially considering how much effort's been put into making the game into a quality that really, had it released as it is now, sure, still wouldn't have met the expectations thanks to the hype it was given, would have done far better. Now with the future of the game, there are promises of more and more updates, more features coming in, more improvements, more fixes, as well as the promise of free DLC or FLC coming out in the future. And in coming over to the Cyberpunk 2077 website, we can see their commitment to quality. And so far we have indeed seen multiple hotfixes and patch 1.31 released going into Q1 of 2022, updates, improvements, and free DLCs, as well as free next-gen console updates. But in going through their FAQ, we get more of an idea of just what this commitment meant. Starting off with, why is there such a gap between PC versions of Cyberpunk 2077 and old-gen consoles? The hardware gap between consoles and PC gaming is always going to be a large one. Now that is assuming you're going mid to top-end PC, as inevitably there will be a lot of PC gamers who are using low to mid-end specs. Computers are expensive, and particularly now with the GPU shortage, that's probably going to increase as time goes on, as more and more people will be unable to upgrade their hardware. But the gap is still there, and particularly with the old generation consoles, hardware limitations will always come into play. But inevitably the question does arrive that, since a lot of the reviews were based upon the PC release of Cyberpunk 2077, at least initially, why were there not more reviews based on the console releases, especially since, going over multiple consoles, one would have thought there would be a fair spread between previous gen, current gen, and PC. And though many reviewers are open about what hardware they're packing in their PCs, it also would be nice to have a little more transparency in exactly what's being used to review this game. As with open worlds, that can be a very big jump. As well as, of course, those PC reviews accounting for low-end, mid-end, and high-end specifications. And though that can somewhat be seen as subjective, when I say low-end, what I'm referring to are the minimum requirements that the manufacturers themselves provide. As, at least in theory, if a computer were to meet those minimum specs, then you would be playing in a state the game designers intended for the game to be played on, at least in terms of its lowest possible capacity, to actually function and play as they intended. Because actually this would really assist in preventing that overhype from occurring again. When it comes to many gaming events such as E3, I'm sure we've all heard about how many of those presentations are highly choreographed, highly scripted, or even just video renders showing off how good their graphics department is, rather than showing any form of actual gameplay and what players are doing. Really, it would be nice to see someone sitting down and playing the game, someone who has no connection to the game itself. Not to mention, in a similar vein to how oh so many indie devs do, releasing actual footage of the games being developed not only has maintained a core community behind each game, but has also led to the majority of players, when they come to finally play it, actually having a good understanding of what the game is and not feeling let down when that moment comes. And I swear one day I will stop talking about indies so much. I don't know what's happened with gaming, they've just become way more interesting. But just exactly what was the history and how did this game get so insanely hyped before it released? Yeah, I know we said we wouldn't go into it, but here we are. A hype that was created over multiple years with a huge ensemble of factors coming together to create a boiling pot of expectations that could never be lived up to, from showbiz names attaching themselves to the game, multiple gaming journalism sites and magazines really doubling down on just how expansive the game world is, how customizable your characters will be, and the sheer level of freedom that had yet to be seen within a video game. And I'm going to confess right here and now that pretty much up until I ran this channel, for the most of the time whenever these sort of things would come up and you'd be reading about how amazing a game would be, I just turn it off, because never once has a game lived up to my expectations after reading a few of these articles. But with so much dedication being applied to marketing the game, showing off what it can be, and though yes, there were still plenty of sites showing reasons to be worried and slight problems that may come in, even noting if we check on CBR.com, they were noting the potential for a downgrade, something that we see multiple times over different games, though most notably from Watch Dogs, they still provide plenty of reasons to check it out. With, rather hilariously, the final worry being bugs can severely mar a great experience. actually kind of eerie going back and reading through this article and realizing how many of the things they were worried about have come to be true. And taking a look at something I'm afraid to say comes from Kotaku, we actually have a very interesting conversation. I'd just like to pick up on one thing said by Ash, because this is going to be our lives now. For at least the next month, I mean, even though we're not the people who are working on it, we'll be working on it. It's still going to be something that's just going to absorb all our working lives because it's the thing everybody is going to click on and want to talk about. Now, for those who followed along this rant, I swear it's coming to an end soon, but it's a very important point that so much of the hype building and marketing of pretty much everything, but being as this is what I'm into, particularly for video games, is generated by the relationship between the consumers of gaming journalism and the gaming journalists themselves. The more and more people want to know about something, the more and more they will write, regardless of what it is, what it means, or what it does to the actual game itself. Promises can be made, ideas can be blown out of proportion, and the idea of what the game is against what the game could be grows further and further apart until, just as we've seen, that disconnect has to be brought abruptly together. And yes, I appreciate that saying this in hindsight is one thing, whereas being in the moment is entirely another, but it is definitely something to reflect upon, and I'm glad to see that people are doing, as I said with those over on Reddit, highly promoting the idea of not overbuilding hype for new things coming out. And given that there was plenty of internal strife within the company, with developers being vocal about their problems with the launch, not only is there a question on how much these companies and developers are actually putting into the marketing as opposed to the development of their game, you certainly have to question the running of the events and journalism that is included, how it is promoting titles and creating an idea of what a game will be upon release, regardless of the realities of the development and the current state the game is in. And I do hope that this will lead to the request for more and more transparency from game developers as to exactly what is happening, exactly what this is being made on, exactly what it's being tested on, and if it's going to release over multiple platforms, then we need to know how it's playing on each and every one of them. But I do feel like this has gone on for a little too long, as I've ranted a touch here and there, and I kind of want to keep these videos a wee bit shorter, even though that's blatantly never going to happen. But Cyberpunk 2077, following the autumn sale discount, has accumulated a very positive score over on Steam. So though the release shall never be forgotten, I do suppose some congratulations are in order, especially given that if we go over to the PlayStation Store, we do still have an important notice. Users continue to experience performance issues with this game. Purchase for use on PS4 systems is not recommended. For the best Cyberpunk experience on PlayStation, play it on PS4 Pro and PS5 systems. Though interestingly, over on the Xbox, no such warning. There we are, Cyberpunk 2077 now receiving very positive reviews over on Steam. It may have suffered an extremely poor release, but it does appear as like CD Projekt Red has actually pulled off a comeback. It certainly won't clear them of the state of the release of this game, but if nothing else, it does show a dedication to their player base. They have messed up and they are improving, so they'll definitely have people paying very close attention to their next release. But on that note, thank you very much for watching Bear News. Hope you've enjoyed. I'd love to know if any of you picked up Cyberpunk, particularly on the older consoles, just how your experience has been down in the comments. And if you'd like to help the channel, sending this to your friends and seeing what they think really is all I can ask for. Till next time, as always, peace out.